In the year 1997, 5-year-old Deborah Brashers resided in the bustling town of Huntsville, Alabama, with her mother, Mary, and her 2 older sisters. As she grew up, Deborah always assumed that her sister's father was also her own. However, her sisters were not blood relatives. They had been adopted in 1995. Deborah often wondered about her biological father. Was he alive? Where could he be? Each time she posed these questions to her mother, Mary would reassure her that her father would return when the time was right. Little did Deborah know, her right time was just around the corner. In 1997, 2 years later, Deborah and her mother were sitting in their backyard when they saw a large black car pull up to their home. A man stepped out of the vehicle. It was Robert Eugene Brashers. He revealed to Deborah that he was her father. Overjoyed, Deborah rushed towards him and embraced him. When she asked where he had been all this time, he explained that he had been busy with work. He owned a construction company, which required him to travel to various locations for extended periods. Following this family reunion, they decided to relocate to Arkansas. Life in Arkansas was idyllic. They lived happily with their father, going on family trips and enjoying all the activities that a content family does. However, a year later, Deborah began to notice a change in her father's behavior. One day, while Deborah was at home, Robert announced that he was going to the liquor store and wanted Deborah to accompany him. As they were preparing to leave, Mary stormed out of the house furious. He forbade Robert from taking Deborah with him. This led to a heated argument, and Mary declared that she would leave the house the next day and never return. The following morning, Mary awoke to find Robert pleading with her not to leave. Eventually, she relented. Robert's behavior grew increasingly peculiar after his work trips. One day, while Deborah and her sister were playing in their room, Robert entered and scolded them. When her sister retorted, Robert lost his temper. He grabbed his daughter and hit her multiple times. This marked a dark turn in their previously happy family life. Upon witnessing her father's unusual behavior, Deborah felt a surge of fear. She had never seen him in such a state before. Despite this, she held on to the belief that her father was a good and kind man. Later, another incident occurred that further unsettled her. While she and her sisters were playing outside, they noticed their parents engaged in a heated argument. They overheard Robert declaring that he would rather take his own life than be imprisoned. He mentioned a gun in his car, but before he could act, a family friend swiftly removed all the bullets and fled. Robert immediately gave chase in his car. This incident made Deborah realize the importance of the gun to her father and hinted at secrets he was keeping from them. One day, as the family sat in their living room watching the news, a horrifying story was reported. A mother and her 11-year-old daughter had been brutally murdered and assaulted, and the crime scene was just a few houses away from their own. The news sent chills down their spines. The news broadcast showed a picture of the suspected perpetrator of this heinous crime. Although the man in the picture bore no obvious resemblance to the man watching the news, but it was indeed Robert. Unbeknownst to Mary and Deborah, the kind-hearted man they lived with was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Deborah began to notice that whenever her father was in the vicinity of the police, he would conceal his face with various accessories. It was as if he was hiding from something, but at the tender age of 8, Deborah couldn't comprehend the implications. On April 12th, Robert and Mary shared some unexpected news with their children. They announced that they were getting married. This decision struck Deborah as odd. They had been living together as a couple for years, and they had previously agreed not to get married. What had prompted this sudden change of heart? Deborah later discovered that the day before the announcement, Robert had been arrested for tampering with the wiring at someone's house. The person turned out to be his former boss. However, he was released the same night after reaching a settlement with his boss. The reason behind their sudden decision to marry became clear. Married spouses cannot be compelled to testify against each other. Their marriage was not a declaration of love, but a strategic move to prevent Mary from being used as a witness against Robert. After several days, Robert went into hiding. Mary confided in Deborah that their father had committed some serious crimes and had never faced trial. Now he was on the run. Mary believed it was a simple gun charge, oblivious to the true nature of his crimes. Whenever they met him, they ensured no one saw him. In one instance, they concealed him behind a large blanket. They loved him so much that they never told anyone about his situation. One day, Mary received a letter containing a mobile number. It was from Robert, expressing his desire to meet them all. They decided to rendezvous at a Super 8 motel in Kenneth, Missouri, where Robert was evading the police. The family arrived at the hotel and met their father. Unbeknownst to them, it would be the last time they would see him. On January 13, 1999, Kenneth police noticed a stolen vehicle parked in the parking lot of the Super 8 motel, the same motel where the family was staying. After speaking with the motel staff, they discovered that the Brashers and his family had arrived in that vehicle just days earlier. Upon learning this, officers broke down the door and entered their room. They found Robert hiding under the bed with a gun in his hands. He was enraged and opened fire, forcing the officers to retreat and call for backup. Within minutes, the motel grounds were surrounded by police cars. Robert took his wife and daughters hostage. Officers began negotiations, and after 4 hours of continuous dialogue, he released the hostages. However, he continued to show resistance and hinted at causing harm to himself. As he had indicated, he inflicted self-harm. He was immediately rushed to the hospital, where doctors stated that the gunshot had damaged his brain and survival was unlikely. 6 days later, on January 19th, he passed away. His death was a heartbreaking event for his family, who were still unaware of his crimes. However, in 2018, after 19 years, they were about to discover the gruesome crimes of their father. In September 2018, Deborah, who was married by then, was at home when she heard a knock at the door. Upon opening it, she found 2 police officers. They informed her that they were investigating a case that had led them to her father. They revealed to her that her father, Robert Eugene Brashers, was a serial killer. This was shocking news for her as she had been completely unaware. They further informed her that he was a suspect in 3 murders, 1 sexual assault, and 1 attempted murder. To confirm the details, they needed DNA samples from Deborah. She agreed and provided her DNA. The next day, Deborah began researching every single detail that the police had told her. That's when she discovered the heinous crimes of her father. In 1983, he was arrested in Port St. Lucie on charges of assault on a 24-year-old woman named Michelle Wilkerson. According to the police, he met her on November 22 and convinced her to accompany him to a bar. After spending their evening there, he took Wilkerson to a dark alleyway near a citrus grove, where he attempted to make sexual advances on her. Wilkerson refused and attempted to leave his vehicle. After this, a fight ensued between them, during which Robert shot her twice. Despite the injuries, she managed to remain conscious. She then left the car and hid in a culvert under the road. Robert tried to find her but found no signs of her, so he threw his gun into the sea. However, after his arrest, he was charged with first-degree murder and was sentenced to 12 years in prison. But in 1989, he was granted parole. After his release, he moved between the states of South Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia, often changing his place of residence. In 1990, just 1 year later, he continued his horrifying acts. This time, he broke into Genevieve Zitricki's apartment, assaults her, and then strangled her to death. He then violated her lifeless body. After this, he dragged her body to the bathroom and placed it in the bathtub. Before leaving, he wrote a message on a mirror, "Don't fuck my family." On March 11, 1997, Brashers entered a home near Memphis, Tennessee, committed an inappropriate act against a 14-year-old girl who was staying at the home with friends. His reign of terror continued even after this. Upon learning about these crimes, Deborah was completely distressed. She finally realized that the man she thought was perfect was an absolute monster. The week after the DNA reports came in, they confirmed the heinous crimes of Robert Eugene Brashers. Even after this news, Deborah was still recovering, but then another tragedy followed. Her mother, Mary, took her own life on December 23, 2018. She felt guilty because she had a chance to turn her husband in, but she didn't because she thought it was a simple gun charge. To this day, Deborah still hasn't recovered from the trauma she faced.
And then I look at this one, and this is the one that hurts even worse. Because this little girl was the same age as your daughters almost, or my sisters. Did you not think about their family and what would happen to their family when they found them the way they did? But you didn't care.
Subscribe to our channel for more such videos. Leave a comment if there's a specific case you want us to cover.